Really enjoy the opportunity to talk to a group of people who've come all the way to World Dairy from probably all over. We've got some Australians, probably some Americans, maybe some Canadians, maybe a whole kind of mix, which is what I am. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of managing top performers. I use the analogy of cars because that tends to resonate with people. And the topic today is going to be sports cars versus farm trucks. How do we manage our top performers? For a little bit of context, Novus is the company that I work for, and we are a feed additive company. So we sell to feed companies, we sell to dairy farmers, various ingredients. But what we realize very quickly is that no amount of specific grams of feed ingredient fed to an animal are going to solve problems that start with them standing in, let's say, 6 feet of manure. That ain't going to, the feed ingredient ain't going to help your feed, right? So we've developed an on-farm program called the C.O.W.S program that essentially does like a completely in-depth evaluation of the cow comfort on dairy farms. So we evaluate farms across North America, Canada. We've done a few in Europe. We're dabbling about doing that internationally as well. We've scored over, I'd say, 200,000 cows for all kinds of things like lameness scoring. Ooh, thank you. Like lameness scoring, body condition scoring, injury scoring, and it impacted over 1.6 million cows. In that process, doing those thorough evaluations of farms, we see a lot. We get to really understand what's working and what's not working on dairy farms. So that program is a two-step program. We do the on-farm assessment, and then we come back with the report delivery for the farmer and summarize all of the results for those individual farms, and we're also able to compare those results with their peers. So whether they're in a freestall system, a robotic system, a tie stall system, we've got benchmarks for all types of different herds, and they can compare themselves to others within that same benchmark. So from there, that's the context. That's where we're seeing some trends in the industry, and we want to share those. And what we're seeing is differences in the speed of evolution of the various ways we produce dairy cows. So when we go to the concept of looking at 40 years of change, let's go with the vehicle example first. Whoops. The 1981 car of the year, and this is very subjective, so I just went to, I think, motortrends.com and picked out their car of the year. We're going to go with that. The Plymouth Reliant, top performance, top speed, 99 miles per hour, okay? And the 0 to 60 speed test, 12.3 seconds. Car of the year for 2021, Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Top speed, 186 miles per hour. 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. We've basically increased top speed 100% and reduced the acceleration to half of the time it took 40 years ago. So let's look at our top cows. Supreme Champion in 1981 produced over 305 milk, 6,500 kilos in her lactation on average. Milk fat of 3.4. 40 years later, Shakira in 2021 Supreme Champion, 14,000 kilos, 4.8% milk. 100% improvement in 40 years. What supported this change, this evolution in dairy cows? I'm going to say part of it is engineering, right? Engineering of cars, engineering of cows, genetics, exponential improvement. About modern selection and breeding practices have impacted about 30% of the genome of dairy cows. That's how we're seeing those incredible improvements in production. When we look at fuel, obviously our fuel has evolved in 40 years for our vehicles. It has for cows as well. You think about nutrition. Okay? Back in the day, we were doing basic ingredient feeding 40 years ago. We kind of did bulk feeding. Individual ingredients were put together, potential partial ingredient feeding. It was all scribbled down on a piece of paper, potentially by a nutritionist, sometimes just in-house. Then we went to TMRs, total mixed rations, with additives, with specialty ingredients that have very advanced technologies. We went to more advanced balancing softwares that are able to balance rations by minerals and by amino acids, and include all of these various ingredients at the milligram level. Somehow, though, more recently we started going backwards a little bit. When we're thinking about some of our robotic practices, we're going back towards partial mix rations, where we're seeing some ingredients being fed in robots, some ingredients being fed in feed bunks. So that's kind of an interesting potential advancement, potential de-advancement. We're also seeing still a lot of scribbling happening on farms. Somehow, even though we have all these softwares, we still get our feed tables on a piece of paper, and they do get tweaked quite a bit. So there are some opportunities for more precision in those spaces. So we've got better engineering, better fuel, and yet in these cows, in 40 years, we're seeing lower fertility, we're seeing higher lameness, and we're seeing lower longevity. Why is that? Why are we not able to match those parameters with the improvements in production that we're seeing? Well, if we think about milk production and the fact that it's increased exponentially, we look at the amount of research that we've seen over the last 40 years for things like lameness specifically, we see this countercorrelation. More production, or sorry, equal correlation. More production, more research on lameness. What we're also seeing is more lameness overall. So what created these challenges? Well, solid engineering, high quality feed. What about the maintenance and environment we're keeping these vehicles or these animals on? So let's go back to our Mercedes-Benz, okay? We've got our Benz. We know it goes fast. We know it performs well. We put top quality fuel in it, perfect engineering, and then we don't change its oil. Or we only drive in bumper-to-bumper traffic. Or we drive it down this road. Or we let its tires go bald. Or we put it in a climate and don't manage its environment, so it's driving around with 600 pounds of snow on top of it. We let salt and snow accumulate on the tires. We let it rust. These are all things that are going to impact that vehicle's performance, obviously. We know that, right? You don't maintain your vehicles, they're not going to perform. And yet, when we compare those environments to the environments we keep our cows on, we're seeing a lot of the same things. We're seeing heat stress. The animals are not climate controlled. We're seeing overcrowding. We're seeing poorly managed hoof hygiene, eroded concrete on pathways. We're seeing a lot of inadequately sized stalls for the animals and the sizes. Animal size does change over time, as should our environment. Hoof care management, questionable. Feeding management. We can have the best balanced, top quality TMR if you don't keep it in front of the cows. What difference does it make? It's as basic as that. It's as simple as that. We have not kept up with maintaining the animals the way that they need to be maintained as the top performers they are. The challenge, of course, I'm saying this is very simple and very easy. It's not, because these things are also very cross-functional, okay? So an issue, let's say, in lameness can then impact fertility, which can impact production, which may impact mobility and handling of those animals. It's a very complicated space to do well. And if one thing goes wrong, it can snowball. So if we take a step back and look at the 40 years of change in the environments that we keep cows, let's look at the tie stall versus free stall. People think, oh, the evolution of management of dairy cows has come a long way. We used to keep them in tie stalls. Now look at them. They're in robotic milking herds in some cases. They're open, they're free, they can go where they want. Free stalls were invented in when? 1962? It is not a new technology. Okay, we've been doing free stall housing for a long time. Some do it well, some struggle. So, what are some of those factors? Well, I walked around the show yesterday, took pictures of, let's just use mattresses and stalls as an example. Let's take a look at all the different kinds of mattresses and stalls that are available at this show. Now, let's have a dairy farmer go and talk to all of these people and pick which one works and which one doesn't. Because I can tell you, mattress-based systems are imperfect. There are some systems on here that are interesting and have potential. There are some that are total garbage. I'm not going to tell you which is which at this point. We're going to stay neutral. But how do farmers parse that out? It's a struggle. And I'll tell you, there's ethical selling and there's also unethical selling that takes place, right? In the feed space, we're in an area that's interesting because we need return business. We need people to keep buying products because they're consumable. In stalls, buildings, environment, foot bath, those things are long-term investments. A lot of those dealers look for a one-time sale and don't need to talk to you for another, they should be talking to you 10 years at minimum for mattresses, but they don't, 20, 30, 40 years, and then you purchase again. In that time, a lot can go wrong for those cows if you've made the wrong investment. So, oh, look, another one. So, let's take a look at some of the recommendations we try to communicate to farmers that we work with and our customers to be better critical thinkers, to think like cows when they're looking at how to manage and how to house those cows in the ideal environment. When we look at the economics of lying time, we know that relationship between milk yield and lying time are very prevalent. Lying time, people think lying time is a great indicator of cow comfort. More equals better. It does if you're starting from a point where the cows are limited, okay? So if your cows are only lying 4 hours a day, yeah, any additional lying time is going to help them. But if your cows are lying 17 hours a day, what are they not doing? Eating. So what are they not then producing? Milk. Generally, those really high lying time cows, the lame cows, the three-legged cows, the really submissive corner of the bunk terrified cows, the heifers that you just mixed into a mature pen that are terrified, right? So there's optimal lying time. Every additional hour of optimal lying time equates to 2.4 plus pounds of milk a day for those cows, right? So anything that we do wrong to these animals once they're born is eating into that genetic and fuel potential that they could be producing for you. When we look at housing and lying time, and we look at mattresses specifically, the more bedding you put on mattresses, the more lying time you get to optimal. The more milk you're going to get. The better return on investment you're going to get on those mattresses. Mattresses are imperfect. When we look at deep bedding, people think deep bedding is the way to go for cow comfort. Deep bedded sand is perfect. It can be worse if you don't fill those stalls, because then they just turn into concrete boxes you're forcing cows to lie in, right? So the risk is even greater if you don't manage these correctly. When we compare organic versus inorganic bedding, we do see some changes to lameness. Generally seeing a reduction in lameness for inorganic bedding versus organic bedding relative to infectious lameness. The challenge is, if you're trimming your cows too much, you're putting cows and walking them on concrete, there's sand on that concrete, they're now walking on sandpaper and they're over-trimmed, where's that going to lead? Lameness, right? So you've really, just like our micromanagement of genetics, micromanagement of nutrition, you gotta be a micromanager for housing and management. All of these things can work and all of these things can be disasters if you've got the wrong parameters working together or the wrong practices. So speaking of mattresses, we know that generally well-managed deep-bedded systems are the top of the line for cow comfort with the right stall dimensions. Not everybody can manage deep-bedded systems. Like I said, if you're not going to manage them right, they can be worse than mattresses. So we think, okay, if some people have to do mattresses, how do we sort through those 55 different types of brands that we're seeing at the World Dairy Expo for farmers? What we did with the work that we do, we assess farms all over the place. We talk to farmers very regularly all over the country, internationally. We actually did some survey work. My colleague, Kelsey Hefter, spent some time calling farmers that we'd already worked with and also any farmers that we work with moving forward, asking them what they thought of their mattresses if they had a mattress barn. What brand did you have? How old is it? What do you think? We got some real interesting feedback. I hid the brands, because again, for this session, we're going to stay neutral. If you want to hear more specifics about different brands, come visit us at the booth. Okay, we can go into some details. But we've got really interesting feedback about longevity of these mattresses, level of comfort, toughness, ease of maintenance. Really cool feedback. There are some that producers cautioned against. There are some that producers really strongly recommended. We could correlate that with the measurements we took of those farms to see if what their impressions were matched up with what their cows are saying. Because what we'll also see sometimes is something that we call barn blindness. You invest $2 million in something. Are you more likely to want it to work or not work? Make it work, right? So you might start polishing some of those hard edges just to keep your cognitive dissonance under control. And so that's where we really want to make sure that what we're hearing is also correlating with what we're seeing on the cows. Key takeaways when we looked at all our feedback is that if you're investing in mattresses, foam with a rubber top cover that can be replaced. That way you can increase the longevity of your mattress. Keep that top cover, replace that foam that gets compressed over time. It's going to give you more life out of those mattresses. All mattresses wear, tear, break down after 7 to 10 years and should be replaced. Anybody who tells you they're going to last for 40 years, they might last for 40 years, but your cows won't. I'm going to tell you that right now. Proper bedding management has a huge impact. If you think about a stall mattress seller that tells you they have good traction, the cows don't slip, they can get an up and down really comfortably, but they don't rub. How? If they have good traction, they're going to rub. That's the whole point. That bedding creates that layer that protects the animal from pressure points and from that traction that we're seeing that creates pressure on the joints, leads to inflammation, arthritis, and all kinds of wear and tear on those animals that you may not see in the trimming chute on their feet, but they're still lame. Okay? Now, if we pivot over to stall dimensions, we've also got lots of different dealers out there that are telling you you can fit more cows in with these stalls because they're flexible, because they move. Cows don't want to have to move things out of the way to be comfortable. That's still pressure on those animals. Guys will tell you, oh, if your cows are lying sideways, it's because the stalls are too long. Move those neck rails or those brisket boards back. Thinking about a rectangle, what's the longest length if they're short? Diagonal. So you're making shorter, what's happening, right? You're just angling them more instead of actually needing to widen them, not shorten them. These are things that we need to think about. So we did a study at the University of British Columbia, moving that neck rail back and forth on various pens of cows. We had one pen with a really aggressive neck rail, one pen that had a really forward neck rail. We looked at the progress of lameness over time, over 5 weeks. Cows with the aggressive neck rail got more lame. Cows with the non-aggressive neck rail got less lame. So we're like, well, maybe it's just the groups of cows we had in there. We'll swap them. So we swapped it. Those cows that were getting better or getting worse with the neck rail got better without the neck rail. The cows that got better with no neck rail got worse with the neck rail. Simple as that. Reason for that being, cows were perching. Cows were standing 2 foot in the stalls, 2 foot in the back alleys, putting all that pressure and all that moisture on their back feet, creating a lot of pressure on those feet and increasing the risk of infectious lameness, right? Pay attention to your cows. Your cows are going to tell you whether they're comfortable or not. Those behaviors matter. That's how we need to manage them, by listening to them. There are all kinds of risks for lameness, both for infectious and non-infectious lameness. A lot of them are interconnected. But realistically, the goal is to keep cows off wet surfaces as much as possible and lying and giving them optimal time to lie as they want, okay? So having them stand in systems that are too wet with excessive flushing or slurries or the poop tsunamis we see with scrapers because scrapers aren't running often enough. That's going to cause problems for infectious lameness. Poor foot bath management. We got easy recommendations. We know what the ideal foot bath looks like. We have a lot of these answers. You just got to do it right and not make any shortcuts. Hoof trimming. Sometimes hoof trimming is great and nobody remembers to take off those wraps. And they constrict and they constrict and they constrict, right? We have to follow all of the steps to a proper practice to make it work well. I'm going to leave this up. These are recommendations for foot bath management. Okay? If you want the slide or you want recommendations, you can come to the booth. I'll give them to you. This is out there. It's not rocket science. It's not unknown. We know what we need to do to properly foot bath animals. More is not more. Okay? More acid is just going to burn your feet. More foot bathing is just going to burn your feet. You got to do it right. Follow the recommendations with the products and the foot bath dimensions you're using. Alley management. This is a big one that people don't think about as much. We're seeing more and more rubber being placed in barns, right? In alleys. We're seeing there's like 6 or 7 people minimum at this show selling rubber for alleys. Okay? What are slip and slides made of? Rubber? Yes, right? So wet rubber can be worse than concrete if you don't have the right rubber in. Okay, rubber with proper grooving, with proper surfacing is important. You need to go, if you're seeing a rubber distributor, go see a farm that has installed it. Go walk those pens. If you're going like this, so you don't wipe out, it ain't going to be good for your cows. Yes, if they fall, they're not going to break themselves like they would maybe on concrete. The cows shouldn't be falling, period. We should have enough traction, and we shouldn't be having them on these surfaces long enough to be creating damage. They should either be resting in their stalls, at the feed bunk, maybe there's rubber there where they're spending a lot of time standing, in the parlor, drinking a little bit, and that's it. That concrete shouldn't have a significant impact in the alley. If it is, there's something wrong with how the cow's day-to-day is looking. Speaking of a cow's day-to-day, okay, 12 to 14 hours lying, 2 to 4 hours eating, 3 hours at the parlor, a couple hours drinking. This socializing is also an important factor. This is a balanced time budget for a cow. If you pull something out of whack here, it gets problematic. If you're 3x milking and your milkings take 3 hours each, how long is that cow in the holding pen? Especially the at-risk cow that's like the last that goes in, but also the last that comes out. 9 hours of time standing in a holding pen, crowded with other cows. Is that going to have an impact on her performance? 100%. So when we looked at time away from pen, and we reduced it from 6 hours to 3 hours, we saw an increase specifically for heifers, a great increase in production, but also for cows. Heifers I call at-risk animals because they tend to be highly stressed highly easily. It's all new, everything's new to them, but they also have the greatest genetic potential, naturally. They're the youngest animals if you're following a genetic improvement plan. So we can't lose focus on those first calf heifers. We also got to pay attention to our mature cows that are paying the bills. Stall stocking density, okay? Overstocking. In the US, we see a lot of this. We see overstocking 120%, 140%, 160%. That means those animals are not getting access to the resources they want when they want them, okay? Whether it's a robotic milking system or not, don't care, it's the same thing. Cows are herd animals. They want to do the same things at the same time. They want to eat fresh feed when it's freshly brought down. They want to lie down together when the weather and the temperature is appropriate. Limiting access of those resources to those animals will just erode your production, your fertility, and your lameness. What we've seen often, when a farm is at 160% stocking density, they drop 20, 30% of those cows. Production, the bulk tank doesn't change. Why? Those cows that we've left that now have access to those resources are producing more, making up the difference. And you don't have to feed them those extra 20% of cows anymore. Actually, you made some money because you sold cows at a nice price, especially right now. Effects of heat stress. This is obviously a seasonal one. It can be a regional one. Heat stress is huge. Every hour a cow lies down, her body temperature increases about 0.5 degrees. That gets hot real fast if it's already hot. So thinking about mitigating that, keeping those cows lying for what they need in an environmentally controlled environment will maximize their performance. Shade, air, water availability, soakers, holding areas that are cooled. Other factors like flies, all are going to be contributing to that. So we need to manage those as dairy farmers. I've got some recommendations here. The Dairyland Initiative does great work. Dr. Nigel Cook does great work. The recommendations are out there for speed. When we're measuring speed, when we're measuring fan angle, make sure that the air that you're, like that ventilation and that air movement you're looking for is hitting the cows, not your head. If you're standing in a pen, where are the cows lying? Here, right? Thinking like a cow, cow-centric thinking, where are those animals feeling those resources or accessing those resources? Make sure that that's what they're getting, not what we think. Not when we get hot. Cows get hot a lot faster than we do. Same thing with water. Water quality, water access. Hugely important. During times of heat stress, exponentially more important. Okay, we need 3 to 4 inches of water space per cow. Transition cows need more. That's a lot of water space, and that's measuring lengthwise, right? And it's when the cows have access to it. If there's lots of water on the way from the return alley, or down the return alley from the parlor, that's great. Cows only have access to that when they're walking down that return alley. So I wouldn't consider that pen water, right? It's a good thing, but it doesn't mitigate not having enough water in the pen. The last topic we're going to talk about is handling. Okay? Handling is one of those things, it's that human-cow dynamic that sometimes we forget. We've got the best resources, best stalls, best foot bath, best management practices, but labor matters. Quality of labor matters. How we handle animals matter. If we're rushing cows, we're injuring cows. Stressed animals, even if they're stressed because of handlers or human intervention, will have a hit on their performance. Also leads to human injury. Also leads to animal welfare crises. The industry is being more and more targeted with undercover animal rights extremists because they're capturing some of these really poor handling methods. We need to be vigilant of that and thinking about the longevity of our industry, maintaining our customer base's confidence. Proper handling of these top performers, like if you're not gonna, bumper car your Mercedes-Benz, you shouldn't be bumper carring your cows. Okay? They're performing to the top of their ability for you. Stress-free handling techniques are available online via YouTube videos. Lots of universities have lots of good training videos for staff, labor, French, English, Spanish, any language you need. It's available, it's important, and it needs to be focused on. There needs to be a proper reporting system and accountability. The other challenge we see is that there's usually one bad apple that everybody is afraid to tell on. There needs to be proper reporting so that owners and managers can handle those bad apples appropriately. Somehow, some way, different farms have done it different ways using comment boxes or things like that. It's a great opportunity to weed out some of those bad apples. Key takeaways, really, keep and manage cows like the high performers they are. Think like a cow. Genetics and nutrition have shown exponential improvement over the last 40 years. Housing and management has not really kept up. We're still struggling to really iron that out. Lots of different options out there, not all of them are good. What do we need to do? Use critical cow-first thinking. So that is comfortable housing, ideal time budgets, optimized hoof care, climate-controlled, and gentle and effective handling for our animals. There are other services like ours, other companies that will support farmers and support service providers in being able to think about and train people on being that cow-first critical thinking, seeing the animal as they are in that pen. To help you, use them, use those resources. Ours, for our dairy farmers, is free of charge. It's paid for through feed additives. Other systems work like that. Some you have to pay for, but they're often worth it. Outside eyes onto a farm will eliminate that barn blindness factor. And it really helps identify those areas that need troubleshooting to properly manage those cows. So with that, that's all I got. I'm gonna be at my booth, at the Novus booth on the east wall all afternoon. If anybody has any questions, wants the slides, wants more information, feel free to stop by. I can be a little less PC on a one-to-one and give you really the nitty-gritty if you want it. But otherwise, thank you very much for your attention, and I'll take any questions. Yeah. You gotta speak loud. Yes. Ideal width, length, and height? Yeah, so great comments. My response to your question about the ideal dimensions is give me your cow size, and then I can give you ideal dimensions. One size does not fit all, right? All cows come in different sizes, whether it's the same breed or different breeds. So that's where some farmers have big cows. Some farmers have what I would call more commercial cows, a little bit wider and shorter. You got to match your stalls to your cows. Age grouping is also helpful for that. To the open system, we do have a lot of pack-based systems or pasture-based systems. That's a whole different set of dynamics. That's where we have to think about udder control, udder hygiene in pack systems, okay, the kind of bedding management we need in packs needs to be really highly managed to do well in that space. Comfort is always great. Udder health can be questionable if you don't do it right, so there's higher risk there. But for comfort, it's awesome. Pasture-based systems, mud becomes an issue, weather, sun, shade, that can be an issue. So every system can be the most comfortable and also the least comfortable. You just have to think about what system works for your management style and then match it up. But good questions. Any other questions? No? Yes.
What portion of the herd you guys visited to
Great question. What proportion of the herds that we do cows assessments on actually implement the changes? It does really depend on how that herd was selected for the assessment, whether it was the nutritionist who's like, you really got to do this, and they're completely closed off, or they're really open. But I'd say, give or take, probably 70 to 80% make changes that have an impact. And we have done reassessments where we did an assessment, let's say in February of this year, we'll do a reassessment February of next year. And almost always we see improvement in the areas that they were weak in, whether that be lameness or injuries or lying time, things like that. What can happen is you make a change in one area, creates challenges in another area. So it's a constant evolution of troubleshooting. Farms are dynamic. But overall, we see lots of improvements. It's just help identifying the lowest common denominator, the bottleneck that's limiting production the most first, and then going from there. What a lot of people will do is see that there are cow comfort issues and then implement the easiest change, not necessarily the most effective one, and spend the money there or the time and then not see the improvement and then lose all motivation. That's what we don't want to see. We want to help them make the change that will have an impact through our assessment. Good question. Other comments? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you at the booth.